Dark clouds covered the night sky. The stars disappeared behind the gray. No one noticed the silent shadow that moved across the upper atmosphere. It was not a storm. It was something else. Something watching. High above the earth, a ship floated, quietly. Its body was black like deep space with sharp lines and silent engines. Inside, 7 creatures stood around a glowing map. They were tall, taller than any man, and covered in dark scales. Their eyes were bright yellow. Their jaws were wide and sharp. These were apex predators from another world. They called themselves the Valar. "This world is soft," one of them hissed. "They build cities but leave their backs open." Another predator zoomed in on a human city on the glowing map. Weak, slow, untrained, not worthy prey. The leader stood still watching. His name was Sarkal, the Huntmaster. He had led hunts across 9 galaxies. He had hunted the last warriors of many races. To him, Earth was nothing more than another name on his kill list. "Then let us enjoy the sport," Sarkal said. "Mark the strong ones. Leave the rest to burn." The Valar prepared their gear, plasma bows, bone blades, and stealth armor. They would hunt not for food but for honor, for the thrill, for the story. Below on the surface, a man walked through the woods near a quiet town in Alaska. His name was Rainer Cole. He wore a thick jacket, carried a small backpack, and held a walking stick. He looked like a man on a peaceful hike, but his eyes were always scanning. His steps were silent, and in his past, there were wars. Rainer had served 15 years in special forces. He had seen battlefields others could not survive. But now, he just wanted quiet. He lived alone, off-grid, in a small cabin near the lake. He hunted, fished, and read old paper books. The world had moved on with drones and satellites. But Rainer still trusted his ears, his instincts, and the wind. That night something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no crickets, not even the wind, just silence. Rainer stopped and looked up. He saw nothing, but he felt something. Then, in the distance, a flash of light. Not lightning. No sound followed. Just a fast streak toward the trees, like something falling or landing. Rainer crouched low. He listened. Still no sound. He turned back toward his cabin but froze. There was a shape behind a tree. Tall. Thin. Wrong. It vanished when he looked at it directly. Rainer didn't run. He moved slowly, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a small scope and scanned the woods. Nothing. He turned back toward the flash he had seen earlier. He moved like a ghost, silent, trained, blending with shadows. 1 mile out in a clearing, a small craft sat. Black, round, steaming. The ground around it was burned. A large figure stepped out, followed by 2 others. They wore armor made of bone and metal. Their faces were hidden behind strange masks. They moved like wolves, sniffing the air, checking for movement. Rainer watched from behind a fallen log, eyes sharp. He didn't understand what they were, but he knew one thing. They were hunters. He turned to leave, but he heard something, a snap. Behind him, something fast moved. He ducked just in time. A long, curved blade sliced the air above his head. Rainer rolled and pulled out a short combat knife. His enemy growled, low and deep. It lunged again. Rainer stabbed forward, fast and hard. The blade slid into something soft. Hot blue blood spilled onto the ground. The creature screeched and fell back, holding its side. Rainer didn't stay to watch. He ran, fast, not in panic, but in control. He weaved between trees, jumped over roots, took sharp turns. Behind him he heard more screeches. They were hunting him now, but Rainer had one advantage. They didn't know this land. He did. He led them away from the town, deeper into the forest, toward an old mine entrance, one he had used before to store. Here the forest grew thicker. Visibility dropped. The predators moved slower. Rainer reached the mine and slipped inside. He pulled a lever hidden behind a rock. The entrance collapsed behind him. Dust filled the air. Silence. He moved deeper. Inside, he had gear, old weapons, traps, tools. Raynor lit a lantern and looked at an old photograph pinned to the wall. His old unit. 10 men. Only 3 had made it out alive. He was one of them. Outside, the Veiler stood near the mine. One of them knelt beside the blood. He bleeds red, soft skin, yet he fought. The injured one growled. He stabbed me. He moves like a predator. Sarkal touched the blood with his fingers. This one is no prey. He is a challenge. He turned to his hunters. Mark him. Hunt him. If we take him, we take this world. Inside the mine, Raynor stitched a small cut on his arm. He looked at the strange black blade he had taken from the predator. Light, sharp, not from Earth. He placed it next to his gear. Then, he sat and planned. He had been hunted before, by humans, by machines, by killers, but never by aliens. Still, the rules were the same: observe, adapt, survive. He drew a simple map on the wall with chalk, marked his traps, routes, escape points. Then he slept for only 2 hours. That was enough. Morning came. Cold, gray sky again. No birds. Raynor left the mine and started setting traps, silent tripwires, weighted nets, spike pits, all hidden under leaves and snow. The Veiler watched from trees, curious. They saw him alone, unarmed. They smiled behind their masks. They moved in fast, 3 of them. The first one stepped on a tripwire. A sharp log swung from the side and broke its neck. The second was caught in a net, flipped upside down. The third turned to run, but Raynor was already there, waiting. He shot a bolt from an old crossbow straight into its chest. 2 dead, 1 captured. Raynor walked toward the hanging predator and pulled off its mask. Its eyes were yellow. Its mouth was full of fangs, but now it looked afraid. Raynor stared at it for a long second. "You chose the wrong planet," he said. He tied the predator's hands and dragged it back to the mine. That night he sat across from it, both of them lit by lantern light. The alien growled. "You are not normal prey." Raynor didn't smile. "Neither are you." "Why do you fight?" "You're alone." Raynor leaned forward. "You came to my world. You hunted my people. You don't get to ask questions." Outside, Sarkal watched from a distance, hidden in the shadows. He saw the bodies of his fallen hunters. He saw the traps. He saw the human. His yellow eyes narrowed. "This one is different," he whispered. "This one learns. This one strikes back." He turned to his second in command. "Send the message. This world is not prey. It is challenge. Begin Phase 2. In the stars above Earth, the Veiler ship received the signal. New pods were prepared. More hunters. Bigger weapons. But Sarkal wasn't smiling. For the first time in many hunts, he felt something old. Not fear, but respect. The human was dangerous, and the hunt had just begun. The cold wind moved through the trees, brushing against Raynor's face as he stood still, watching the forest. The night was quiet again, but this time it wasn't peaceful. It was tense. He had set traps, made plans, and even captured one of the creatures. But he knew it wasn't over. Something inside him said the real danger hadn't started yet. Deep in the woods, shadows moved. The trees, once silent, now held eyes. More of the creatures had come. Raynor had counted 3 at first, but now there were more. He could feel it. The forest itself seemed to change. The air grew heavy. Even the animals had vanished, sensing what he now faced. Inside the mine, the captured alien sat quietly, no longer growling or struggling. It simply stared at Raynor, its bright yellow eyes watching every move. Raynor stared back. There was something in its look, not just anger, curiosity maybe, confusion. "You didn't expect this, did you?" Raynor asked. The creature tilted its head slightly but said nothing. Raynor leaned closer. "You thought humans would be easy, that we'd run, hide, beg. You thought wrong. The alien looked away for a second, then slowly turned back. You are not like others. Raynor nodded. No, I'm not. And now you've seen what one human can do. The alien's voice was low and rough. More will come. You cannot stop them. I know, Raynor said, standing up. But I won't be alone next time. He left the mine and walked back into the woods. Every step was slow, careful. His eyes searched the trees, the branches, the sky. He wasn't just moving. He was thinking, watching. The forest wasn't just land to him. It was a weapon. He remembered his training, ambushes, tracking, patience. His instructors had once said the best hunter is the one who knows when not to strike. He reached a high ridge and looked out across the valley. In the distance, he saw something new, faint lights moving through the trees, far too organized for animals. Too fast, too quiet. Not machines, not drones. More of them had landed. Raynor narrowed his eyes. He now knew this wasn't a small hunt. This was something bigger. A test, maybe. A warning. A show of power. But why Earth? Why humans? He returned. To the mine, heart steady but mind racing. He began gathering supplies, more traps, tools, old maps from before satellites took over. He also carried something else, a message. He took a small radio he had kept hidden for years and turned it on. Static at first. Then, a faint voice. A code. An old one. It was still active. Raynor took a breath and pressed the button. This is Raynor Cole. I've made contact with unknown hostile units, non-human, highly trained. They're hunting. I have one alive. Repeat, I have one alive. They're planning something. If anyone's listening, be ready. He let go and waited. No reply. Not yet. Hours passed. The night grew darker. But then, 2 clicks. A reply. Not words, not a voice, just a signal. He smiled slightly. He wasn't the only one out there. Back in the woods, the new group of creatures began moving. They were more careful than the first group. They had seen what Raynor had done. The bodies, the traps, the captured one. They no longer saw him as prey. They saw him as a threat. But Raynor had already changed the rules of this game. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was preparing. Because when the forest goes quiet, and even the sky watches in silence, the world changes. And in that silence, a single human had turned, the hunt around. The creatures had numbers, but Raynor had something stronger. He had purpose, and now, he had time. The mountain winds howled gently through the old pines, carrying with them a strange silence. Raynor stood at the edge of a cliff, watching the stars. He could see the faint glimmer of a shape moving against them. Too large, too smooth and not from Earth. The sky was no longer just sky. Something was above, watching, waiting. He had known for 2 nights now that more of the creatures had arrived. They moved carefully through the woods, no longer careless like the first ones. They didn't chase him in a rush. Now they observed him, tested him, stayed out of reach. But Raynor understood that kind of patience. It was the kind that comes before something bigger, something final. Back in the mine, the captured one remained tied, still breathing, still alert. Raynor had stopped asking it questions. Instead, he watched it. Every glance, every shift, every breath gave him something. The creature might not speak, but it still communicated. It still reacted. He studied their armor, their tools, their strange devices. Every item told him they didn't just come to harm. They came to learn, to measure, to understand humans not just as creatures but as opponents. That was what bothered him. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a test. And if they were testing, someone, something, was judging the results. Raynor placed one of the stolen tools on the table and began pressing symbols. It pulsed with light, then opened a glowing map of the nearby area. Not just trees and rivers, but living things, humans, animals, even plants. The creatures could track life. That meant they already knew where the towns were, where people were hiding, where they would likely run. The map glowed bright in the direction of a nearby valley. His old hometown, still home to hundreds. If the creatures were ready to act, that's where they'd go first. He closed the device and packed what he needed. The time for hiding was gone. If they were going to make their move, he had to move faster. On his way out of the mine, he paused by the captured one and spoke calmly. You came here thinking this was a game. You believed humans wouldn't resist, that we were simple. You've already lost people because you didn't understand us. But what's coming next won't be a mistake. You're going to test us for real. Just know, we adapt faster than you think. The creature didn't reply, but something in its eyes changed. Not fear, something deeper. It understood now that Earth was not what they expected. Rainer moved, quickly through the forest, across ice-cold streams and through thick fog. His movements were quiet, but his mind was loud. Every choice mattered now. Every minute counted. When he reached a hilltop overlooking the valley, he could see lights far below. Houses, roads, a small school. Normal life, still untouched by what had landed in the mountains. They didn't know yet, but they would. Rainer pulled out the alien tracker and activated it again. This time it showed more than before. A massive signal moving across the upper atmosphere. It wasn't a patrol. It wasn't a scout, it was the main ship, and it was getting closer. He used the stolen communication device and sent a simple signal, just 3 words. They're coming soon. Far away, someone received it. Another survivor. Another soldier. Maybe even someone in charge. Rainer didn't know who, and he didn't need to. What mattered was that someone else now understood the truth. Earth was being studied and judged. Rainer stayed low in the grass, eyes fixed on the stars. In the quiet, he thought of his younger days, training, missions, things that seemed far away now. Back then, they trained him to survive. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about showing them something they didn't expect. Humanity didn't give up. It didn't break. It learned. It adapted. And it always responded when pushed. Rainer looked down at the valley, then up at the sky. Whatever test they were running, whatever judgment they were planning, he was ready to make sure the answer would change everything. Snow began to fall gently from the sky, covering the forest in a quiet, pale light. The air felt heavy, not with cold, but with something unseen, something watching. The world around Rainer Cole didn't move the way it used to. Even the wind seemed cautious, like it knew something was coming. He stood at the edge of a frozen lake, breathing slowly, watching the water beneath the surface shift. It wasn't the lake that held his attention. It was the silence behind him. It was too perfect, too controlled. Not natural. Rainer had spent years learning how to read a place. Environments told stories. Footprints, broken branches, air pressure, bird patterns. Everything revealed something if you knew how to look. And this place was saying only one thing. Now, they were preparing. The ship in orbit had changed its pattern. He had seen it the night before, hovering in the distance like a shadow with lights too steady to be stars. It wasn't just waiting anymore. It was measuring. And what they measured was nearly complete. Rainer crouched by a patch of snow, brushing it aside to reveal marks on the ground. Tracks, thin and sharp, not the same as before. Lighter, faster, tighter groups, new hunters, smarter ones. He whispered to himself, they're not just searching anymore. They're closing in. He didn't fear them. Not anymore. What concerned him was their purpose. They hadn't made direct contact with the larger human population yet. No announcements, no attacks, just silence and observation. That meant one thing. This was still a test, a study, but tests always had conclusions, and that conclusion was near. Rainer moved back through the trees, keeping low. He passed landmarks he knew well, an old wooden bridge, a ridge shaped like a giant's back, the hollowed tree where he had once stored emergency supplies. He checked everything twice, setting small signs for himself. Markers. He wasn't just tracking them anymore. He was drawing them in. Back in the mine, the captured alien sat in silence. It had stopped pulling at its restraints days ago. It now watched everything Raynor did with something more than curiosity. It was almost thought. Raynor had noticed the change. The creature blinked slower. It reacted not with instinct but with caution. There was intelligence in those yellow eyes, something deeper than the mission it had come with. He sat across from it, lighting a small lantern, letting the warm light fill the cold mine. "You know what's about to happen, don't you?" he asked. The creature didn't answer with words. Instead, it looked toward the entrance, as if sensing the same shift in the world that Raynor did. Raynor leaned forward. "They're going to arrive in full. And when they do, the test ends. They'll decide what happens next, what kind of species we are, if we're allowed to survive or erased like dust." The creature made a small movement, almost like a nod. Raynor stood up. "You've watched long enough, you've seen how we fight. But you haven't seen why we fight." He walked to a crate in the corner and pulled out an old radio, the kind used long before satellites, the kind that still worked when newer systems failed. He turned the dial, letting the static roll. Then came a voice. A woman. Soft, calm, clear. "Echo team reporting in. We received your warning. Eyes on the sky. We're ready." Raynor closed his eyes briefly, breathing with relief. He wasn't alone anymore. He answered back. "I've got movement near grid 12. They're watching the valley. You'll need to move fast." There was a pause. Then, "Understood. You're not the only one fighting this." Raynor turned off the radio. It wasn't just him and a few creatures in the woods anymore. It was spreading. Across the state, across the country, across the planet. Others were waking up. Raynor returned to the clearing where he had left markers. He moved with calm purpose. The snow had almost hidden the tools, the patterns, the steps he had memorized. But he wasn't just moving to survive now. He was positioning. Not for escape, but for the moment when they would come out of hiding and speak their judgment out loud. Because Raynor understood something the invaders didn't. A single person can resist, but a prepared people can change the outcome. And across the world, signals like his were being received. Quiet calls, quiet responses, not from armies, not from governments, from people, strangers, survivors, fighters, the kind of people who don't forget and never wait to be saved. Clouds rolled across the sky like slow waves, casting shifting shadows over the mountain. Somewhere beyond them, the ship still waited, silent, steady and massive. It hadn't moved in hours. It didn't need to. It had already done what it came to do. Raynor Cole stood at the edge of an old fire tower, binoculars in hand, watching the forest breathe below. Everything looked peaceful, untouched. But that peace was only on the surface. Underneath, things were shifting, plans, patterns, signals. He could feel it in the way the birds had changed flight paths, in the way the trees leaned against the wind as if trying to listen. The map from the alien device still glowed inside his coat pocket. It had updated overnight. Now, instead of small glowing points, there were thin lines, like threads connecting places across the region. They weren't tracking life anymore. They were tracking intention, movement, strategy, and something else had appeared. A circle pulsing just north of the valley. Not just a target, but a center. Something was being prepared there. Raynor packed up quickly and climbed down the fire tower. His boots crunched lightly in the snow, but he moved quietly, blending into the landscape like a shadow that knew its home well. The creatures hadn't shown themselves in full yet, but he'd spotted new signs, markings on trees, strange devices left behind like sensors, even faint, whispers in the air. Not natural wind, but soft mechanical pulses that made his skin tighten. He followed the path east, toward the circle he had seen on the map. As he got closer, The forest began to change. Trees here stood farther apart. The ground was smoother, more open. He saw strange indentations in the soil. Too round, too precise. Like the land had been shaped. He knelt by one of them and brushed away a thin layer of snow. Beneath it, the earth glowed faintly blue. They had built something here. Underground. Raynor circled the area for over an hour, studying patterns. It wasn't just a structure, it was something active. He could feel it humming beneath his feet. And then he heard it. A soft tone. Repeating, pulsing, not loud, but impossible to ignore. It came from below. Raynor found a small rise in the earth, covered by stones and snow. He moved them carefully, slowly, until he saw the edge of a smooth surface, darker than rock, too perfect to be natural. He placed his hand on it. Warm. The device he carried blinked once and then projected a shape into the air, a circular room, walls covered in symbols, a central column, and in the center, an image, Earth. Not just a map, but a record. Moments from history, natural disasters, conflicts, space launches, voices from different cultures, faces from different countries. They had been watching for longer than anyone knew. Raynor sat down beside the projection, heart steady, mind racing. They didn't come just to see what we are, he murmured. They came to decide what we become. Back in the mine, the captured alien stirred for the first time in hours. It looked toward the entrance, then closed its eyes. Whether it was sensing something or remembering something, Raynor didn't know. But he understood what that silence meant now. The test wasn't about weapons. It wasn't about fear. It was about value. Would humanity be seen as something to welcome or something to contain? Raynor returned to the surface just as a soft light spread across the sky, not sunrise, not moonlight. The ship was descending, slowly, quietly, with no engines, no fire, just a presence. He raised his radio. "This is Cole. They're preparing for something large, not just landing presentation. They want us to see it," a voice responded. "Copy that. We're moving teams into observation range. No aggression. Not unless they initiate." Raynor looked up again. His breath hung in the cold air. He didn't know if the world would be the same after this night. But he knew something else. They had studied humanity long enough. Now it was humanity's turn to study them. Not with fear, but with resolve. The sky was no longer a canvas of stars. It had changed, softly at first, then fully, completely. A low shimmer now hovered across the upper air, like a veil gently laid over the world. Shapes moved behind it, tall, silent, and smooth like glass drifting in water. The ship hadn't landed, but it was closer than ever. Its presence could be felt in the bones, in the air, in every still tree. Raynor stood near the edge of a frozen meadow, hands in his coat pockets, watching the glow above. It wasn't just light. It was something else, coded perhaps, or layered with meaning. The trees didn't sway, the air didn't move. Even time itself felt stretched, like the planet was holding its breath. He had seen strange things before. In combat. In ruins deep in foreign ground. But this wasn't just unfamiliar. It was intentional. A message, without words. And Raynor understood that message even if they hadn't spoken. They were ready. He checked the tracker again. The same pulsing circle still blinked on the map, but now it had grown lines, spreading outward like branches. The system was activating, not a weapon, something else. A broadcast, perhaps. A kind of call, to whom he wasn't sure. He turned slowly, scanning the field. That's when he saw them, 3 of the beings, standing just past the tree line, still and silent, not hiding, not threatening, just watching. Raynor didn't move, neither did they. Minutes passed. Then one of them stepped forward. The motion was smooth, controlled. The creature's eyes, bright, soft gold, met Raynor's. There was no fear, no anger, and then something surprising happened. The creature raised its hand, not as a threat but as a sign, a calm one, an echo of something human. Raynor hesitated, then mirrored the gesture. The field stayed quiet. It was the first moment that didn't feel like a hunt. It didn't feel like a test. It felt deliberate, shared. Behind him, the small communicator crackled to life. A voice, distant, but urgent. We're picking up a frequency shift across the region. Not just here, global. Same tone, same code, structure. We think they're trying to communicate. We think it's peaceful. Raynor didn't answer right away. He lowered his hand slowly. His breath rose into the cold morning like smoke from a quiet fire. They're not here to destroy, he said quietly. They're here to understand something we haven't shown them yet. Back in the mine, the captured alien looked upward. Its eyes reflected a faint shimmer, as if it too felt the change. It had stopped trying to escape days ago. Something had shifted in its expression, its posture. It wasn't a prisoner. Now it was an observer. It watched Raynor with calm interest, maybe even a form of respect. Raynor moved through the field slowly. The beings didn't react, didn't retreat. They allowed him to pass between them. One turned slightly to follow his movement, but didn't interfere. He reached the rise overlooking the valley. The towns below were waking up. Soft lights in homes, plumes of smoke from chimneys. Life as usual, but above it all that shimmering field glowed gently. People would see it soon, some already had. The world was going to change, forever. The communicator crackled again. We've translated part of the signal. It's a question. Raynor paused. What's the question? The reply came after a moment. It asks, are you ready to become more? Raynor stood still. His breath slowed. He looked up at the shimmer and saw the meaning behind it. Not threat, not fear, but invitation. They had judged humanity, not just for its strength, but for its potential. And now the next move was his, was theirs. Not a fight, not a surrender, but a choice, the kind that only comes once in 1,000 years.